This program is made possible by the support of Delta Dental, Quick Trip, Marshfield Clinic Health System, Wisconsin Counties Association, Wisconsin Hospital Association, Watch Wisconsin Eye on Spectrum Channels 995 and 363, and at wisi.org.
Killed at the killed at the hands of the individuals and law enforcement in our state and our country. As I said last night, we have and we will continue to stand with all those who have and continue to demand justice, equity, and accountability for Black lives in our country. Lives like those of George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, Tony Robinson, Dontre Hamilton, Ernest Lacey, Tyrese West, and Sybil Smith. We also stand against excessive use of force and immediate escalation when engaging with Black Wisconsinites. I've said all along, we must offer our empathy. We must see the trauma, fear, and exhaustion of being Black in our state and our country. But equally important to our empathy is our action. As family members, as friends, as neighbors, as people, the duty to act rests on all of us, and perhaps most importantly, on us as elected officials. More than 2 months ago now, Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes and I announced a package of legislation to increase accountability and transparency in policing in Wisconsin. This package invests in community violence interruption program and works to address the issue of inappropriate use of force by individuals in law enforcement, prohibit dangerous police practices, build upon the work of the Law Enforcement Standards Board, and strengthens accountability measures. These are common sense policies that transcend political debate, and many of them have been embraced by community, state, and federal leaders on both sides of the aisle, including our neighbors in both Iowa and Minnesota, who have passed similar comprehensive, meaningful reform. Yet 2 months later, and with Wisconsin's legislative leaders have failed to act. This movement has touched every corner of Wisconsin, and frankly, I should not need to call a special session when people across our state, from streets from my small hometown of Plymouth to the streets of Milwaukee, are demanding their elected leaders take action. Leaders show up. Leaders do the work that needs to be done and that the people demand of them. But we cannot wait for Republican leadership to show up for work because clearly they intend to keep us waiting. That's not going to cut it. Not for me, not for Lieutenant Governor Barnes, and certainly not the people of the state who are leading at this time and in this moment. That's why today I'm calling for a special session of the legislature to take up the package of legislation we announced earlier this year. We must begin the long but important path towards ensuring our state and our country starts to live up to our promises of equity and justice. I want to be clear, this is not the time for politics. I'm urging Republican leadership to rise to this important moment in history, to put people before politics and to put lives of Black Wisconsinites above politics, and to give this special session the urgent and productive effort this moment demands and that the people of Wisconsin deserve. We must rise to this movement and this moment and meet it with our empathy, our humanity, and a fierce commitment to disrupt the cycle of systemic racism and bias that devastates Black families and communities, to see the daily trauma, fear, and exhaustion Black Wisconsinites face, and to show up day after day to do the work that needs to be done. I know folks across our state will be making their voices heard in communities across Wisconsin. Every person should be able to make their voices heard and report on these calls to action without any fear of being unsafe. If you're exercising that right today and in the days ahead, Please do so peacefully, and please wear your mask and keep social distance as best you can. We know racism and the racial disparities in our state can't be solved by any single bill or package of bills. This can only be the first step. As our state reels from another attack on a black man at the hands of law enforcement, as communities grieve and exercise their First Amendment rights to demand justice, and as Jacob Blake fights for his life, we are all reminded that racism is a public health crisis. There is no time to waste. Thank you so much. And now I'll turn things over to Lieutenant Governor Mandela Barnes.
All right, thank you so much, Governor Evers, for taking a moment. Thank you for your sincerity that's much needed at a moment like this. Last night, as you stated, Jacob Blake was shot in the back 7 times in front of his children. And let me be clear, this was not an accident. This wasn't bad police work. This felt like some sort of vendetta being taken out on a member of our community. The officer's deadly actions attempted to take a person's life in broad daylight. And like many of you, the video is etched into my mind, like so many other past videos that are just like it. It was a video that I would have rather not had to have watched. But the irony isn't lost on me that as Jacob Blake was actually trying to de-escalate a situation in his community, but the responding officer didn't feel the need to do the same. And now we all know Jacob Blake's name. And as I've said before, as we've all said before, this is familiar violence to too many of us, especially of those of us who are on the receiving end, whose communities have been over-policed, whose children learn early on that police officers aren't always serving and protecting them as they should. This didn't start with George Floyd, unfortunately. It's been around far longer than him, and if we don't do anything, this will continue as we saw yesterday. I would hate to see this not end with Jacob Blake. And that's why we have to respond. And we know that we can't remedy the white supremacy and the systemic racism that is built into all of our systems in just a couple years or with any package of legislation. But that doesn't mean we don't act. That doesn't mean that we stand still. We have to do everything that we can do within our power to first call out the systemic violence that happens every day in this state and in this country, and then do the work to rebuild those systems that perpetuate it, Not just when a black man is murdered in front of his children, but when schools that serve the same children are systemically underfunded, or when we see black women have to fight to be heard in our healthcare system, or when black communities are expected to live in more polluted communities, dealing with environmental hazards and toxins and contaminants. These too are forms of systemic violence. And the social and economic consequences of these deep-seated inequities, they reach every community across Wisconsin. That's why leaders at every level of government have an obligation to hear the demands for justice for those who are marching in the streets. You think after the past few months of people who are stepping up to demand justice that police departments, chiefs of police, even police unions will rush to implement some sort of reform. But that hasn't happened, or else you wouldn't have seen the actions that we all had to see last night. People's pain, anger, and frustration is a long overdue call to action. In June, the governor and I called on the legislature to bring some level of accountability and transparency into law enforcement. And we knew that this legislation would only be a first step towards justice, but that doing nothing is not an option. Unfortunately, our legislative leaders, the majority party, the Republicans in the legislature, although this is not political, these are facts, they have done nothing. And this is unfortunately what we as Wisconsinites, not we as the executive branch, not we as the Governor Evers administration, we as Wisconsinites have come to expect nothing anytime that we find ourselves in a time of crisis. The people of our state are done waiting for their leaders and their elected officials to show up. And so are we. And as the governor said, true leaders, they do the work that has to be done. True leaders do the work that people demand of them, especially when it's hard. So I sincerely hope for the people all across Wisconsin that we see some leadership from our legislature in the coming days. As I said before, doing nothing is not an option. This is not something that you can just sit on your hands or bury your head in the sand in. To everybody that is as tired as I am Know that I stand with you in this fight for a better world, a world where Black lives actually matter, a world with decency, a world with true justice, a world full of equity and opportunity for all people, for Black people who have been dealt a bad hand far too many times. And remember that these things are always worth fighting for. So I want to remind people to please take care of yourselves. Please stay safe. Join me in praying for Jacob Blake and his family, and join me in fighting to make sure that this does not ever happen again. Thank you so much.
Thanks, everyone, for joining us. We will turn things over to the governor and lieutenant governor, and then they will take your questions.
Thanks, everybody, for being here today. We had the opportunity to speak to the people of Wisconsin and let them know that we're hoping that we can get some expressions of leadership around this issue of policing and making sure that people are safe in Wisconsin, especially Black people. And so we're here to answer any questions you might have. I'm not sure the lieutenant governor has any open comments.
Yeah, I'll just say hey, and thank you all for joining us. Thanks for taking the time to cover this.
Go ahead.
Governor Scott Bauer at AT. Two questions. One, are you calling up the National Guard in Kenosha, and if so, how many troops? And then secondly, I was said that police demanding that Blake drop a knife. Have you heard anything about him possessing a knife or having any other kind of weapon on him before the shooting?
I think I can answer the second question. I couldn't understand the first one. There's been no visibility in any conversation about Mr. Blake being in any way. Could you do your first question over? It broke up completely for me. I'm Scott, right?
Scott, can you repeat your first question, please? Can I pick this up? Hillary Mintz with WISN 12 News. I'll follow that. So, can you tell us, do you have any reason to believe Jacob Blake was armed at the time of this shooting, or was a weapon found in the vehicle?
There's no information that I've seen that would suggest that, but this is undergoing a thorough investigation by the Department of Justice, and at some point in time we will have the answer to that, but neither Lieutenant Governor or I have any information to verify that question.
And is the National Guard going to be here in Kenosha this afternoon?
Actually, they were there last night, and they will be there tonight. The Kenosha requested the assistance, and we agreed to do it last night. And they will continue to be there tonight in a situation where they are guarding infrastructure and making sure that our firefighters and others that are involved are protected.
Governor Melanie from the Wisconsin
Examiner.
Examiner.
From WISN. Wondering, are the National, just to follow up, are the National Guard members currently there, or are they en route, and how many do you expect will be in Kenosha tonight? And have you been briefed by the Justice Department yet on the investigation?
There's going to be 125 there tonight, and I just spoke before. They were not there last night.
And have you been briefed by the Department?
Melanie Conklin from the Wisconsin Examiner. Do you have any response, both Governor Evers and Lieutenant Governor Barnes, to Speaker Robin Vos declaring that he is going to appoint a task force on policing and racial disparities? Today he had made that announcement.
Well, first of all, I believe there's several bills that we proposed this very issue, And, I know the speaker, I talked to him, he wants to do this task force. We believe it's time for action and look forward to a successful conclusion. Other task forces have served some purposes, but we've had several where there's still bills sitting in the legislature that were the result of task forces. I believe it's time for action.
This is Lieutenant Governor. This is just another abdication of responsibility. Racial injustice in this state has existed long before Robin Vos was the Assembly Speaker. So for him to just decide now it's time for a task force shows that he is once again late to the party.
Has he indicated whether he would hold a special session? Did you have any conversations with either Speaker Vos or with Majority Leader Scott Fitzgerald?
I left a message for the Majority Leader, and I spoke to Speaker Vos, and I didn't sense that he was going to. We talked about the, but in general, he seemed to be unmoved by my request.
Okay, I do hear some voices.
Okay, good. Matt and Hillary are on there. Governor, this is Molly Beck with the Journal Sentinel. Do you plan to take any executive action if the special session doesn't, if they gavel in and gavel out?
Well, we'll do whatever we can, but this is time not just for us to do something in the executive branch. The legislature and the executive branch need to work together. Some of the bills that, frankly, we proposed, all of them came from the Black Caucus and our conversations with them. But there's other bills that are part of that have Republican support. And I spent a lot of time talking to other Republicans about these bills. So I think they're common sense, and I think they should be passed. So hopefully we can get some unified leadership on this issue. This important issue should not just rest on our ability to do something with the executive order. We need legislators at the table, period.
Governor or Lieutenant Governor, any update on Blake's condition at this moment?
We just what we've heard through the grapevine, I guess. It looks like he's still in serious or critical condition, whichever. I'm not in a position to say it, and he has had surgery. We're praying for his recovery.
The man was shot 7 times in the back.
Lieutenant Governor and Governor Evers, this is Evan Peterson with Fox 6. I was just curious, you said there's going to be 125 National Guard coming to Kenosha tonight. Any idea what time they're expected to arrive?
No, I don't right off the top of my head. I think it's early evening.
Sarah heard 3 o'clock, but apparently that's wrong.
Oh, you're giving the governor a lot of credit for knowing what's going on.
What do you say about the National Guard? He said sometime tonight.
Folks, please mute your phones if you're not asking a question.
My question, Evan Peterson again from Fox 6. My question is for the Lieutenant Governor. We heard you in your speech a little bit ago talking about how protesting safely is appropriate. What was your reaction when you saw some of the fires and the graffitiing of city buildings and things like that down there?
Well, I believe in the speech I said that people have been protesting for the last several months, and we should be seeing some systemic change. I said that police departments, chiefs of police, sheriff's departments should have all been rushing to implement reform. However, as I said previously, when we had the last uprising, I said that we should look at why we got to this point in the first place. I don't think it's productive at all for us to look at the product. We need to look at the process. How do we get to this point? There's literally no reason why we saw. And if it wasn't on video, it would have been another instance of one person's word versus an officer's word, which is taken as some sort of infallible doctrine when it comes to either the way government responds or the media responds. And we know that that's just not the case. Who knows how that story would have been told if there wasn't video, right? That one and so many other incidents. People are tired. People are frustrated. So I think it's important for us to get back to the focus of why we are in this place that we're in.
time for one last question.
Governor, you said that you've received no information yet to suggest that he had a weapon on him. Have you received additional information or briefings from the Justice Department that haven't been made public yet?
No.
Great. Thanks, everyone, for joining today. If you have additional questions, you can send them to our GovPress at wisconsin.gov account. Thank you for joining, and have a great rest of your afternoon.
This program is a production of Wisconsin Eye, an independent, nonpartisan, nonprofit media network with a mission to inform, educate, and engage the citizens of Wisconsin. Wisconsin Eye is the nation's first and only independently funded state civics broadcast network, providing gavel-to-gavel access to government proceedings and events at the state capitol.